Kupferberg of the Fugs to the meeting. The Fugs, a local group that had made a name for themselves, specialized in obscene lyrics. Among the popular songs of Ed Sanders were Slum Goddess of the Lower East Side, Group Grope, and I Can't Get High. Ed had wild red hair and an electric red beard, and he played the guitar during Kirtana. The devotees were happy to see their prestigious guests. The night of the Fugs, however, Prabhupada closed to speak on the illusion of sexual pleasure. Sex pleasure blinds us to this material world, birth after birth, he said, and he quoted, as he often did, a verse of Yamunacharya. Since I have become Krishna consciousness, whenever I think of sex life with a woman, my face at once turns from it, and I spit at the thought. The Fugs never returned. To speak ill of sexual pleasure was certainly not a strategic move for one who wanted to create followers among the Lower East Side hippies. But Prabhupada never considered changing his message. In fact, when Umapati had mentioned that Americans didn't like to hear that sex was only for conceiving children, Prabhupada had replied, I cannot change the philosophy to please the Americans. What about sex? Asked the ISKCON attorney Steve Goldsmith one evening, speaking out from the rear of the crowded temple. Sex should only be with one's wife, Prabhupada said, and that is also restricted. Sex is for the propagation of Krishna-conscious children. My spiritual master used to say that to beget Krishna-conscious children, he was prepared to have sex 100 times. Of course, that is most difficult in this age. Therefore, he remained a brahmacharya. But sex is very strong force, Mr. Goldsmith challenged. What a man feels for a woman is undeniable. Therefore, in every culture there is the institution of marriage. Prabhupada replied, you can get yourself married and live peacefully with one woman, but the wife should not be used as a machine for sense gratification. Sex should be restricted to once a month and only for the propagation of children. Hare Griva, who was seated just to Swamiji's left, beside the large dangling symbol, spoke out suddenly. Only once a month? And with a touch of facetious humor, he added loudly, better to forget the whole thing. Yes, that's it. Very good boy, Swamiji laughed, and others joined him. It is best not to think of it, best just to chant Hare Krishna, and he held up his hands as if he were chanting on a strand of beads. That way we will be saved from so much botheration. Sex is like the itching sensation, that's all, and as when we scratch, it gets worse. So we should tolerate the itching and ask Krishna to help us. It is not easy. Sex is the highest pleasure in the material world, and it is also the greatest bondage. But Steve Goldsmith was shaking his head, Prabhupada looking at him, smiling. There is still a problem? It's just that, well, it's been proved dangerous to repress the sex drive. There's a theory that we have wars because people are eating meat. Prabhupada interrupted. As long as people eat meat, there will be war. And if a man eats meat, he will sure to have illicit sex also. Steve Goldsmith was an influential friend and supporter of ISKCON, but Prabhupada would not change the philosophy of Krishna consciousness to please the Americans. Judson Hall on Fri- oh. Judson Hall on West 57th Street cost $200 to rent for one night. Raya Rama thought it was time Swamiji tried reaching some of the more sophisticated New Yorkers, and since Judson Hall was near Carnegie Hall and sometimes had interesting concerts and lectures, he thought it would be a good place to start. Excuse me. Swamiji agreed to the idea, and Raya Rama printed an announcement, which he distributed in Midtown bookstores. On the night of the event, the devotees paraded through the Midtown entertainment areas, beating a brass drum and handing out leaflets. Then they returned to Judson Hall for the program. Only 7 people attended. The devotees felt terrible. They had misled Swamiji and spent the equivalent of a month's rent. We can't cancel the program. We can cancel the program if you like, Swamiji. Raya Rama said, but Prabhupada replied, "No, let us chant and speak." So the devotees took the stage and chanted with Swamiji and danced, and then sat beside him as he lectured, his voice echoing through the empty hall. Afterwards, Swamiji called for questions, and a young man about 15, vacant, rose back, asked whether he was correct in understanding that the Swami's philosophy was primarily for reforming destitute young people. "No," Prabhupada said, or replied. "Everyone in this material world is lost and destitute, even the so-called successful person, because everyone has forgotten Krishna." After the program, Swamiji sat in a chair by the exit as the few members of the audience were leaving. A respectable-looking couple introduced themselves, and Swamiji sat up very straight with folded palms and smiled. Brahmananda's mother was present, and Swamiji was very cordial towards her. But in general, the devotees were depressed at the small turnout. "I'm sorry, Swamiji, we invited you here and almost no one came." Rama apologized. But Prabhupada raised his eyebrows and said, "No one? You did not see Narada? You did not see Lord Brahma? When there's chanting of Hare Krishna, even the demigods come to participate." Back in the temple, Prabhupada chided Rama, "I told you we should have charged money. When something is free, people think it is worthless. But just charge $3 or $5 and people will think, oh, you are offering some valuable thing." In Bengal, there is a story of a man who went house to house offering free mangoes, and no one would take his mangoes because everyone thought, well, why is he giving away these mangoes? There must be something wrong with them. So he charged 3 rupees, and they thought, these look like good mangoes. The price is only 3 rupees, all right. So when people see something is free, they think it's worthless. Charge them some money and they will think it is very nice. Burton Green was a musician, fond of the Swami and fond of banging on the innards of the piano in the temple during Kirtana. Burton Green, we had a really explosive thing to break out of with this capitalistic, materialistic egg sitting on us. So there was so much ferocity in the music to break out of. But spinning out like that, you could have a nervous breakdown. So it was great to go to the Swami and chant in his small storefront on 2nd Avenue. The streets were full of Maya and perversion, and it was a place to really mellow out. It was great to chant there to balance my life. It was great to sit and have prasadam with the Swami and get some real authentic Indian cooking, chapatis, and talk about things. Especially when I had very little money in my pocket, it was always nice to go. When Burton asked Prabhupada to attend his piano recital at Town Hall Center, Prabhupada agreed. Brahmananda, about 7 or 8 of us in our sneakers and jeans, had ridden on the subway with Swamiji to Town Hall. We went in and took our seats, and the concert began. Burton Green came out, opened the piano top, took a hammer, and began wildly hitting the strings inside the piano. And it went on for an hour and a half. We were all sitting there with the Swamiji, and we all began chanting on our beads. There were only about 24 people in the whole theater. I should stop?
Yes, Mataji.
Hare Krishna. So, from this reading, Swamiji was very adamant about not changing the scriptures to fit American ways. America still is very sex oriented, and even though one of the uh, researchers said that it's very bad to hold back on sex gratification, Swamiji says wars happen because people eat meat. Stop eating meat, the sexual desire will decrease and the wars will stop. So he wasn't changing any of the philosophies. If the itch gets too scratchy, just keep chanting and it'll subside. Um, there were local musicians that would come in to hear Prabhupada speak and just to chant. But some of the crowd, still very hooked on sexual desire, was not persuaded. It's best just to keep chanting through those itches.